Diego Gómez, who's currently at Brighton, having a very good season there. He's going to be a key player. Nobody's putting this crop of players against the 2010 class, who are kind of heralded as that team that finally made the quarterfinals. One big European team is going out. I'll say it's a surprise, everyone.
Welcome, everybody, to Make Football Great Again, your definitive 48-nation roadmap to the 2026 World Cup. I'm Harry Brent, and over the coming weeks and months, we're going to be profiling every single nation heading to the tournament this summer to find out more about the countries, the cultures, the fans, and the teams involved, and hopefully we'll uncover a few little secrets and stories along the way too. Today, as you might be able to tell for those tuning in via YouTube, but the colours I'm wearing, we're covering Paraguay. Exactly. Ralph, our guest, who I'll introduce in a second, has exactly the same. It's either Paraguay or Atletico Madrid, I'll say that. I'm delighted to say we're joined by Paraguayan football expert Ralph Hanna, who I think just confirmed before we came on air, actually, is living in Texas at the moment. So you're going to be right in the heart of the action this summer. How's it all going, Ralph? Pleasure to have you on. Thanks so much for being here.
Hi, Harry. Thanks for the invitation. Yeah, good to be here. Very lucky that I find myself in Texas, where if Paraguay finish third in their group, they'll be playing in Dallas. So it's just a 4-hour drive. Not too bad up to there. But looking forward to chatting about Paraguay.
I love it. 4-hour drive for anywhere other than the US tends to be, that's a pain in the backside. But for US, that's down the road, I suppose. So in a second, we're going to learn all about Paraguay and what we can expect from them this summer. But I'm just going to kick off with a segment I like to call One Truth and One Lie. So what I'm going to do, Ralph, is I'm going to present two seemingly crazy facts about the Paraguayan national team. One of those facts is 100% true. The other is completely false. So I'm going to read them back to back, and it'll just be up to you to decipher which you think is the true fact. So, fact number one. Paraguay goalkeeping legend José Luis Chilavert is the highest scoring goalkeeper in history with 67 career goals. Fact number two. Former Colombia and Newcastle star Faustino Asprilla once had to convince a hitman not to kill José Luis Chilavert, as we've mentioned, after a World Cup qualifying match. Bit of a darker turn on this segment, I must say. But which is the true fact? Is José Luis Chilavert the highest scoring goalkeeper in world history, or did Asprilla have to convince a hitman not to kill him, Ralph?
So I've had breakfast with José Luis Chilavert, and we sometimes message. So he will tell you that Rogério Ceni has scored more goals than him in Brazil. So it's got to be the Faustino Asprilla, which I think came to, they did have a little go-to in that qualifier. But if I'm right in remembering, although it's before my time, but if I remember the tape, I think he scored in that game, Chilavert, a penalty against Colombia.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, you've cleverly avoided my trap. So while it is true that Chilavert has scored 67 career goals, you're right. He isn't the highest scoring goalkeeper. That is, as you say, Rogério Ceni, who scored 129 goals, which is incredible. Asprilla admitted in 2019, he revealed he got a phone call after that game. Both Chilavert and Asprilla were sent off after sort of getting into it on the pitch. Paraguay won the game 2-1. He was phoned up by a hitman and had to convince him not to go and kill the guy. Luckily, he's successful in that endeavor. So anyway, we'll move on from that. Paraguay, 2-time Copa America champions, but haven't made much of a splash at the World Cup. In fact, they haven't taken part in a World Cup tournament since South Africa 2010, a tournament where they went further than ever before, reaching the quarterfinals before being knocked out by eventual winners Spain. In 4 of their last 5 World Cup appearances, they've reached the knockout rounds, but rather curiously, they've never won more than 1 match in a single World Cup campaign. Could this summer be any different, Ralph? Paraguay in Group D alongside co-hosts the USA as well as Australia and Turkey. But before we get into the nitty-gritty about the 2026 World Cup, I just want to kick off officially with the section we call the Travelogue. So before we talk players and tactics, I just want to get to know a little bit more about Paraguay as a footballing nation, the history, the culture, the fans, and all of that sort of stuff. So I'm going to put you on the spot to kick us off. Who, Ralph, is Paraguay's footballing GOAT?
Wow, it's a hotly debated topic within Paraguay between those that like goal scorers. So you have on one side Roque Santa Cruz, But then you have the man we just mentioned, Jose Luis Chilavert, who was voted best goalkeeper in the world 3 times, as he likes to remind everybody when he's on TV, on radio in the country. And so between those two, it's often a tussle. I think at the moment, Jose Luis Chilavert is still considered the GOAT in Paraguay because he had that aura of scoring free kicks, scoring penalties, which at a time when nobody had seen anything like it.
Yeah, he's got that sort of maverick spark as well, which always, I guess, helps in those kind of debates. You know, it's similar to we had an Argentina guest on before and was sort of explaining Maradona always has that edge over Messi because of that, you know, charisma and whatever else. If Paraguay get knocked out this summer, who is the one nation that fans would hate to see lift the trophy?
Yeah, this was a really good question, and I was thinking I had to think about this and go with a few Paraguayan friends. Like Brazil and Argentina have won it already, so even though they're your direct neighbors and the bigger neighbors, you can't really begrudge them. There might be a few fans in Paraguay that have been dragged into the Messi Ronaldo debate, so maybe they don't want Portugal to win because Messi's already got the World Cup. But honestly, I think the two teams they really don't want to win are Colombia or Ecuador, the other South American nations that are yet to win the World Cup. Because if Paraguay are going to end up winning, they want to be the first one outside of Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay to do it. So it's quite funny. Is that that's probably their biggest rivalry.
I like that. It's kind of almost club fan-esque, you know, when, you know, you're not too concerned about the clubs who've done it all and won everything. But if there's anyone threatening to come up and leapfrog you, that's where your focus is. I like
Yeah.
that. With neighbors Brazil and Argentina, you know, having this history of producing mesmerizing attacking talent, why do you think Paraguay have gone the opposite way? Out of necessity, perhaps, playing these guys, the Brazilians and Argentinians every few months?
Yeah, I think is necessity and kind of the progression of football and the way the markets move to basically to Europe, right? Everybody ends up gravitating towards Europe because in the 50s when Paraguay did win the Copa America, they were managed by a guy called Manuel Fleitas Solic, he'd been the player, he'd been a coach, he'd been involved with the national team, you know, pretty much since professionalism or as professionalism was growing. And he's actually credited with being one of the people to help Brazil find the 4-2-4 formation that they use in the World Cup with Pelé. So, because he went after the Copa America when he went to manage in Brazil and in Rio. So they were playing attacking football in the 50s. Then they have this long period where they don't qualify. And in 86, they finally get back to World Cup. So it's a bit like now. And as the game started modernizing, and as to your point, Brazil and Argentina are producing such good forward players. If a Paraguayan wanted to get into a bigger league, which would be Argentina, Brazil, as a forward, they're really going to struggle because of competitions. So it seems like naturally they started building out these better physical defenders. The game is very physical in Paraguay. The pitches aren't great quality still, not today, and definitely not back then. So the ball was in the air a lot. So I think it just kind of naturally progressed to this idea of a defender's going to have more chance of a big career, which was definitely the case until very recently.
We've already mentioned Chilavert a couple of times. Obviously, as you've sort of touched on earlier, one of the most iconic goalkeepers of all time, you know, free kicks, penalties, just general maverick. How much do keepers like Manuel Neuer, like Edison, modern keepers who've helped reinvent what it means to be a goalkeeper, how much do they owe to Chilavert?
That's a really good question because you think about at the time, I think there were a few guys with Chilavert. There was Higuita as well, Rene Higuita, that a lot of people remember for the scorpion kick, and there was Campos in Mexico who had the very colorful shirts of the '94 World Cup, but also he even started playing striker at some point. So there were a few guys doing this, but yeah, it was at a time where I think in Europe and definitely in England, the idea was just get it long, keep the ball in the air, that kind of thing. And goalkeepers weren't meant to be using their feet. Chilavert had a short time in Europe. He went to France. He was in Strasbourg. So maybe some of that culture helped, I think, build the confidence, right, for European goalkeepers. And there was a way you could start using the ball with your feet. And yeah, as we've seen now, it's a totally different game. So maybe Chilavert would fit in well if he was still playing today.
Roque Santa Cruz, Miguel Almiron, Julio Enciso. There have been some pretty successful Paraguayans playing in the Premier League. Why do you think we haven't seen more?
For Paraguayans, one thing that is, it's hard to explain, but for many Paraguayans, they really miss home. So it sounds strange because it's not a technical thing; it's more an emotional thing. But Gustavo Caballero's in Portsmouth right now, and he got asked the other day, "How's the food?" And his face kind of said everything. He misses his food from Paraguay. It's very hard to get typical Paraguayan products in the UK because really there's no trade route. Paraguayans drink something called tereré, which is like yerba mate but cold. You can't just pick that up easily.
Mm.
All the home cooking. So I think there's a lot of that sense of adaptation has been very difficult, and it's actually the players that went very young to Europe that have managed to adapt better. So you mentioned Roque Santa Cruz. He pretty much left at 18. He was off to Bayern Munich. Julio Enciso was the same. He went to Brighton in his teens. So it's the ones that went very young, maybe, and kind of were able to adapt a bit better that have managed it. But honestly, I think it's been part of that process has been very difficult. So what a lot of Paraguayans do is more the Miguel Almiron route. So he played in Argentina. Then he maybe could have gone to Europe, but ended up going to MLS and then managed to go from MLS to the UK. So a lot of players try and do those stepping stones to slowly adapt to getting outside of Paraguay before making the big leap.
Right, we'll move on to the scouting report. So this is where we'll find out a little bit more about the team, the players, the manager, generally what we can expect from Paraguay this summer. So, Ralph, just remind us for the British fans tuning in, who are we going to recognise in Paraguay's squad? Are there any Premier League players in contention? Any Championship players in contention? What can you tell us?
Yeah, so we got Diego Gómez, who's currently at Brighton, having a very good season there. He's going to be a key player. He's done Paraguay kind of through the levels, played in the Olympic team, along with Julio Enciso, who was obviously also at Brighton. People might remember Fabian Balbuena had some time at West Ham. He's not likely to start, but he will be more than likely in the squad as a backup to the two central defenders. One of those, of course, is Omar Alderete, who's currently at Sunderland, having a very good season in his debut season. And then, yeah, Gustavo Caballero, who I just mentioned, he's on loan at Portsmouth from Santos and has started to play quite a few games. So he's found himself in contention actually because of that loan move. He wasn't expected to be there.
In CISO, we've mentioned a couple of times, obviously ex-Brighton, now it's Strasbourg, sister club of Chelsea, obviously. Now, when that signing happened, there seemed to be a kind of unwritten understanding that there's a good chance he's going to be a Chelsea player in the future. Are Paraguayans excited about that prospect? Is there big hopes for Enciso moving forward?
Yeah, Julio Enciso has been, I think, one of the most exciting players they've seen probably since Roque Santa Cruz. And I mean, he burst through in Libertad. He was Libertad, the local team in Paraguay. He was better than everybody around him. He was scoring inside the box, outside the box, taking last minute penalties, even though he was only 18. And he actually played with Roque Santa Cruz, who was there at the time. So you were like, this kid has the mentality, has the talent. I think he suffered a bit from injuries. He's a very difficult player tactically to include because he's a maverick basically. So I mean he'll try and break the lines himself. He'll try and dribble through players, but sometimes that can leave you exposed. So that maybe is why Brighton had some difficulty like trying to fit him in the team. Now he's at Strasbourg. He's got lots of minutes this season. He's scoring goals. I think they found his best role, which is a second striker just behind the number 9. And so if all of that is fitting in for what Chelsea are looking for, then he could be making that move over there. And he's a really exciting player to watch.
Just looking at the group, so USA, Australia, and Turkey, as we've mentioned. How do you think Paraguay are going to get on?
It's a really tough group to call because it's 4 teams that are pretty fairly, I would say, fairly well balanced. Paraguay have a poor record against the US in America. So they lost a friendly last year against Mauricio Pochettino's team. And it was something we saw that they struggled a bit with the pressing and how to break through that. So that opening game could be very tough to get points. And then I think the big focus is going to be on Turkey and Australia to try and just get enough to get through the group. So I'd be surprised if they win the group, but I'm very hopeful they qualify. Obviously, with third place, there's a big chance, but I'm hopeful they can get that second place spot by getting results against Turkey and Australia.
What would constitute a good tournament for Paraguay? Is it as simple as saying getting out of the group, or are there aspirations to go further than that?
Nobody's putting this crop of players against the 2010 class, who are kind of heralded as that team that finally made the quarterfinals. So I don't know if people are expecting the quarterfinals, but every team has always made the last 16. Obviously, now you have the extra round because of the 48 team World Cup. So it's an extra game they have to win.
Mm.
But I think people are looking that it has to be a kind of last 16 to have had a good tournament. The interesting thing about Paraguay is they've never actually won a knockout game at the World Cup. So the one time they got through against Japan was that 0-0 draw in penalties. So even if they did get to the last 16 and it was by virtue of winning a game, these guys will have made history.
Obviously, you mentioned the manager Alfaro. How do Paraguay set up under him? Is it a pragmatic approach? Do you expect them? They'll be will they be attacking teams in certain games? What are we going to expect?
So what we saw in the qualifiers is definitely a defensive first approach. I think is the way to call it. He's very organized off the ball. I mean, he always has been with all his teams, and he was sometimes cycling through like I guess it's like a 4-1-4-1, or he's gone to more of 4-4-2 in some games. But what we saw from Alfaro that was really interesting, a lot of games Paraguay conceded first. So despite the defensive approach, and then he'd gamble a bit on the changes. And there's games, for example, against Venezuela, they were 1-0 down. They came back 1-2-1. I think it was Colombia. They were 2 goals down, pulled it back to 2-2. So he's very good, I guess, at setting the team up for, say, 60 minutes. And then he'll maybe throw in like a left field change and do something a bit different. So don't switch off those Paraguay games. If it's 0-0 at 60 minutes, something's probably going to happen towards the end.
What would you say is Paraguay's biggest strength, and what would you say is their biggest weakness heading into the tournament?
I think right now their biggest strength is defense, which is very traditional. They have Gustavo Gómez as the captain at centre back. I think he's one of the most decorated players in South America now. He's definitely with Palmeiras, the non-Brazilian that's played the most games and won the most titles. I mean, he's been a real rock there. And with Omar Alderete having such a good season with Sunderland, he's really grown up after about 6 years now at playing in Europe. So that partnership is very strong. And then you have a guy, Andres Cubas, who plays for Vancouver Whitecaps in the MLS. They've done very well now with Thomas Muller, so he's getting some World Cup experience there as well, playing with him. But Cubas is kind of like the anchor man, and he's very small, but he's the defensive midfielder that wins the ball back. And so those kind of three are really good in just keeping teams or making it very difficult for teams to break them down. So I think that's definitely the strength. Where they're struggling has been the number 9 position. So Sanabria, we talked about, scored this overhead kick against Argentina. This brilliant moment, but he's not getting many minutes in Serie A at the moment. He plays for Cremonense. Sometimes Jamie Vardy's in there ahead of him. And he's just not scoring many goals. So obviously when your main striker isn't scoring many goals, you're starting to look around. So Alfaro's looking at players in the Argentinian league, looking at players in the Brazilian league that are scoring, but obviously it's a big step down from a top 5 European league. So that's maybe the question mark. Do they have to throw it all on Julio Enciso's shoulders to try and make the goals, score the goals, and do everything else?
We'll just wrap up with some quick fire questions about the World Cup. So just let me know what you think, and we'll see where we get on. So I'm going to put you on the spot. Who is winning the World Cup?
France.
France, okay. Where did Paraguay finish? How do they get on?
I think they'll make that last 16, but the quarterfinals is a step too far.
So that would be a first knockout game victory. Who is winning the Golden Ball? So the best player at the World Cup.
Oh, wow. Let me have I mean, I said France are going to win it, so I should probably say Mbappe.
Mbappe. And who's winning the Golden Ball? Again, you can say Mbappe again. It would make sense in this hypothetical.
With the most goals, right? Yeah, I'm trying. Yeah, let's throw him in there. Let's throw him in there. With just everything on Mbappe.
And lastly, José Luis Chilavert's left foot or Roque Santa Cruz's right foot?
No, Roque's right foot.
Roque's right foot. A
I'll
rocket
take
in
Jose
the
Luis Chilavert's left hand.
left hand. Yeah, that's probably should have been a better one. And lastly, what is your controversial / outrageous prediction for the World Cup? Doesn't necessarily have to be about Paraguay, but what have you got for us, Ralph?
Having said that France will win, I was reading up that it's very interesting that European teams have played so few games in the US compared to all the South Americans because they often just play friendlies up in the US. So I have a feeling that a big European team is going out early. Um, I don't know Germany. They should get through against Curacao, which they're playing here in Houston. But I think one big European team is going out. I'll say to surprise everyone, Spain are going out early.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting because obviously the expanded format, makes it seem like surely they're all going to get through. But usually every World Cup does have a little bit of that. So keep an eye on this. If a big team does go out, Ralph called it first. Lovely stuff. Thank you very much, Ralph. Really do appreciate your time. And that's it for our Paraguay preview. Let us know in the comments how you think Paraguay will get on at the World Cup this summer. And join us next time for more stories, insights, and deep dives as our global scouting mission continues as we count down the days to the FIFA World Cup this summer. Until next time, keep making football great again.